Thanks for coming. We have apologies from Councillor Dutta and we have leave of absence from Alderman Sexton. And there's nobody else that we need to co-opt. So I'll move on to item number 2, which is confirmation of the minutes. Would somebody like to move that? Jax, thanks very much. Any dissent? I was looking over here for the hand. Thank you. No dissent. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 3, consideration of supplementary items. Being none, we'll move on to item number 4. Are there any indications of pecuniary and conflicts of interest? No, being none, we'll move on to item number 5, transfer of agenda items. Would anybody like to transfer any items? No, being none, we'll move on to item number 6, report 6.1, Major Cultural Organisation Grant 2020-2021. And before, it's been moved by Councillor Harvey. Before I open up the motion for discussion, I'd just like the Deputy General Manager, Director to just give us some introductory remarks. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Look, this is perhaps a slightly unusual recommendation compared to how we normally approach the grants program. But I think in the circumstances, it is a fair recommendation. So the Major Cultural Organisations Grant has been going for some years, as you would be aware. And there really are only 4 groups based on the guidelines that Council has previously approved. There are really only 4 groups that are eligible under this category. And since its inception, all 4 organisations have received funding, either triennial or annual. Obviously, given COVID this year, we would normally go out to a competitive round for this grant in June. Given where we were at in June this year, that would have been an unreasonable situation to go out to. And even when we went out with the rest of the grant round in August this year, it was, I think, in all honesty, it was an unfair proposition to go out to these organisations even at that point in time. Given the level of uncertainty, obviously, that COVID has created, given the types of organisations that we're talking about and the type of customer support base they rely on. So look, we find ourselves now at this point in the year and we are suggesting that based on the historical funding of each of those organisations over recent years, we are suggesting that only for the calendar year 2021, so from January through to December next year, that those organisations receive 12 months worth of funding based on their historical allocation, which we think is the fairest way to do it, and that it's not a competitive round for them. But it's not money for jam, so they will still need to demonstrate what each of the organisations will be doing with the funding. And this fund, traditionally, it's a little different to the others. We don't necessarily ask organisations to come up with one specific thing that they will do with their funding, nor though do we allow the funding to be used for administrative purposes. The funding does have to go towards some community-facing activity or performance or exhibition or what have you. And so we would still require that if committee and council are happy. So there would still be significant and important hoops for these organisations to jump through. What we're really saying is we think we should remove the need to go through a competitive process and the rigmarole that comes with that, given frankly, these organisations, even for next year, still don't know how the year is going to roll for them and still don't know what they can and can't do. So, Chair, look, with those words of introduction, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Yes, Jax. Sorry, Councillor Ewan.
Sorry, I muted. Thank you. And Jax is fine. Councillor Ewan's weird. I'm just wondering if you could give me, because obviously I'm pretty new, how long has this particular grant existed for these organisations?
Chair, through you, paragraph 4.2, we were first offered in 16-17 financial year. So generally the grant is for a calendar year, but we commenced the process in June, and it's for funding for the following calendar year or a triennial process of calendar years. But our experience is these organisations operate on a calendar year as opposed to a financial year.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I'm a little sort of uncomfortable, I guess, allocating this sort of amount of money to these particular organisations. I mean, I understand that they've obviously been receiving support from us for quite some time, but I mean, just like $100,000, it would just go so much further with smaller organisations. And I understand that this is for, major cultural organisations, but I'd argue that the majority of patrons to these sorts of events that would put on by these organisations would be only a particular demographic. So I'm just quite conscious of that. So I'd be really interested in whether we can actually maybe get a bit more information or a report, or maybe I have to put up a notice of motion or something, just to make our funding a bit more diversity dependent. Or I guess, are we able to have maybe a report to come back on, how much funding other organisations would get, like the TAC or TasPride or the MRC or any number of other smaller cultural organisations that would reach, more diverse folk. Yes, the end. That was a bit of a ramble. I guess maybe, Tim, could you address some of those, please?
Chair, through you. It's a fair question. Generally, the approach council has always taken, these are, if you like, 4 of the most significant cultural organisations that the city has, and 4 of the largest. Of course, you're not wrong to suggest, well, what about the other groups? And a lot of the other groups are eligible through the different grant streams that we offer, and do receive funding depending on the projects that they put up. And so I know the General Manager is about to sign off on the first half of the biannual grant program for those organisations up to $20,000. So we've been through that process and allocated funding to a whole host of smaller groups, which I can't share yet. But of course, that information does come through to committee once that approval has been given. And again, the $100,000 is in the context of the entire grant program, which is $1.167 million. So we're talking about around about 10%, slightly under, of the entire grant program. But certainly we could provide some information back to committee chair if you wished on some of those where we have funded the smaller organisations over the years. But that will have always been predicated on those organisations having submitted an application for a particular project.
Yes, thank you very much. So would we like to do that? I think that's a really great suggestion by Councillor Ewan. Yes, Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, I don't disagree, but like Mr. Short has said, our grants are based on different levels of grants for different size organisations and things. So there's a program, and it's based on those around those who apply, and it's based on merit as well. So organisations need to apply for grants. We can't just give them out. So I'm happy to look at our grants in the fullness of time, but I'm supportive of these going forward rather than cutting it off, because these important cultural institutions in Hobart rely on our support, and to let that run for another year I think's wise, and then it's reviewed, and then there might be other major cultural institutions that might want to apply in a year's time to compete with these other ones. I can't think of any at the moment, but other smaller institutions or smaller organisations will need to go through the proper process. And if we understand how the grants process works, then they can be encouraged to apply. But it's not for us to deliver grants to organisations. That's for an independent committee who have oversight of the grants. So happy to look at it at some point in time. But for today, I'm happy to support the 4 organisations that have been currently receiving the major grants, and support them again for 12 months. And then when it's reviewed in 12 months' time, we can, or look at the other grants in the meantime, but the major cultural ones, I think, should run for another year, and then we investigate the other smaller grants and how we can maybe create or encourage a more diverse range of organisations to put in applications.
Thank you. Councillor Ewan.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a bit too much to sort of try and overhaul it all tonight, but I'd be really interested in getting some information on, you know, how we can better support more diverse organisations. And I'm a little bit sort of about going, well, just because they're big, they're entitled to a bigger slice of our funding. And I guess personally, I just don't want to see another theatre council scenario, because that decision was made like in one of my first committee/council meetings, and I feel really uncomfortable with how that all unfolded. The degree of funding that they sort of receive, and I didn't really know what was going on and sort of made a decision on it. And I guess I just don't want a repeat performance of that, and I want to make sure that we're actually living our values. So is it possible, do we need to have like an amendment, or should I put like a question on note without notice or something to get some of that information? Because I'd be interested in like having that as a full report, I guess, so that we can make more informed decisions going forward.
Mr. Short, thank you.
Yeah, through you, can I just clarify, Councillor Ewan, at the moment, are you wanting really just a historical list of that funding of smaller organisations, so you can sort of see that wider context of what we haven't done? Because if, for example, it's just that at the moment, I'm quite happy to undertake that I will provide that to elected members just up through the hub. That's not a particularly onerous task for us to do. We can easily pull that information together, and maybe that then might form, Councillor Ewan, if you wanted to take it further, that information then might help you to form a view on exactly what you'd like to bring forward.
Yeah, that'd be excellent. Thank you so much, Tim. Mr. Short.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's important to stay abreast of where our grants are, because you lose track of it if you're not looking at it all the time. And I think we had an alignment or a realignment of grants only just, I don't know, I can't remember, because we only do it once every couple of years. But I think, didn't we recently just realign some of our grants and rearrange our grant structure, Mr. Short?
Chairman, through you, 2 things have happened this year. One was that we effectively pulled apart the grants policy and made it a lot simpler. It had become just an agglomeration of amendments over years. It had become quite clumsy and difficult to understand. So the first thing, which committee and council subsequently approved, was a revised grants policy. The other thing you might recall, I think it was at the last meeting, we've put a proposal to you that we want to pull apart the community partnerships grants program. Again, through just to ensure that it is fair and equitable and that all groups have access to that particular bucket of funding. And we've broadened that out to all the events funding for council. So again, committee and council approved us to go away and have a think about, well, what's a different way to allocate that particular events pool so it is more broad, it's more broadly received across the community. So that's something we'll be coming back to you in the new year with as well.
Okay, thanks. But yeah, having that refresher, what we've done and where we're heading would be good. Yep.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Harvey, anything else you wanted to add? Your hand is raised. No? Okay, no worries. Thank you. Okay, so nobody else wants to add anything. That's great. So I'll just put the motion. Any dissent? No, good. Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 6.2, Community Culture and Events Committee COVID-19 format. Could I have somebody move that, please? Councillor Ewan, thank you very much. Excellent. So I'll just say, I think I'd sent all the committee members an email just with regards to what format you preferred. And to my understanding, everybody's still okay with having it on Zoom. So did we just want to determine that that would still be okay for everybody and just put that as a resolution for this, that we're okay to remain on the Zoom format? Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, can I, if I may make a suggestion?
Yeah.
I know with the other committees where they haven't had the full membership present at the meeting when they've been discussing this item, the other chairs have resolved that the council support effectively contact all committee members and just reconfirm that that's what committee members want to do. So we can certainly offer that as well, if you like, that we can contact individual committee members and just confirm that intention.
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks, Mr. Short. That's lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'll just put this item to vote. Sorry.
Can I just clarify? In yesterday's city infrastructure, I think we added, we'll continue to meet via Zoom until circumstances prevent us, or, until we know how long. Or what was the wording we used yesterday, Councillor Ewan? We subject to
orders are lifted or whatever, something like that. But I mean, hopefully maybe by then the Local Government Act will be reviewed and we'll be allowed to meet online because it's the future.
Yeah, through you, maybe if I can assist, it might simply be, Councillor Harvey, the wording has to include, and until such time as the emergency orders and their effect are no longer in place, or something, words to that effect. My understanding, I did some research on this because I heard that question last night. The emergency order effectively was a 12-month one, so it could be in place theoretically until April next year. And then there is an amount of time in which the minister has the ability to then, give people time to adjust to the outcome of the emergency order ceasing, which is in effect another 150 days. So it's a 90-day period plus a 60-day period. So in effect, the ability to meet online could go on for some time next year.
Yep. Okay. And when we do know the deadline, that's when we probably should request a permanent change, or should we look at a permanent change ahead of the deadline so it can influence, the future decision? What do you think, Mr. Short? Should we start the process rolling so that we can lock this in as a permanent thing, or wait until the deadline's up and then, approach the government to say we'd like this legislative change to allow us to meet online permanently?
Chairman, I might have to take that on notice, because in the back of my mind, I think in talking with the General Manager, I just think maybe some legislative changes are being considered in any event to allow this to become ongoing. But I'm not confident. I just got it in the back of my mind. So maybe we can take that on notice. And I think this question has been asked with other committees. So it might be that the General Manager provides an answer to all elected members.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Short.
Yes, okay, great. Thank you for that. And then we'll just add what the words, I'll leave that with you, Mr. Short, the wording. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's vote on this item. Is there any dissent? No? Great, carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item 7, Committee Action Status Report. 7.1, Committee Action Status Report. Can I have somebody just move the recommendation? Whatever it is. What is it? Yes, thank you, Councillor Ewan. Thank you. Any dissent? No? Good, carried unanimously. Thank you. Item number 8, questions without notice. Are there any questions without notice? No, being none, we'll move on to item 9. Could I have somebody please move that we close the open and open the close? That's moved by Councillor Harvey. Thank you very much. Any dissent? No. Great.